Mm-hmm. Well, hey, I can testify. Speaking of that, I guess we're going on a rabbit trail. But when you first wake up, you can be in a half dream, half waking stage. And this only happened to me twice, so not any other time in the rest of my life, just to show you how rare it is. But when I was about 12, and this is why people claim to see ghosts, I already know. Like, because when I woke up one in the middle of the night, one night, and I looked over, and Daddy was right there by my bed. And he was like, you know, a broken record, how it keeps going like, you know, it was like a broken record. Like he was reaching down to me, and then he would be back in the same position, reaching towards me, but never getting there. This is what I saw. It was kind of like him reaching down, and I was like, and then I remember when I'm like thinking, okay, Daddy's here, he must need me or something. So I remember I kind of lifted up and went, Daddy. And as soon as because when I lifted up, I probably jerked myself awake. Because I remember going like, Daddy, and he disappeared. And then another time, around this same time, so it must have had something to do with, the way my mind was working as a 12-year-old. I woke up, same situation in the middle of the night, and he was at the foot of my bed. Or it might have been my mother this time. I don't remember if it was my mother or my father. I think it was Daddy. It might have been Mom. Anyway. And whoever it was like walking and like doing like this, but repeating the same motion. So I'm laying in the bed, they're at the foot of the bed. So I'm watching them, and they're just like walking, but they like, it's like this repeated motion that never gets anywhere. And I don't remember if it was Daddy or Mama, but I lifted up and said, Daddy. And then as soon as I did that, poof, like the image was gone. So you see things when you just wake up, or you can. So somehow I was in mid-dream, but then kind of half awake, half dreaming. But, so they're wondering what is going on here. And they see him and they're like, it's a ghost. So think about this though. With the wind coming at them, maybe there's a lesson here. With the wind constantly at them, they see a spiritual being and they immediately think it's something good or evil. Yeah, evil. So think about that. You're in the middle of the fight. You're scared to death. It doesn't say they're scared before that, but they're in the fight of their life. They see a spiritual being, and what's their first thought? It must be something good or bad. We just assume the worst. They see Jesus, and instead of being overjoyed, they're afraid. Can you think of any other times in the Bible when people heard or saw God and were afraid? So you've got the prophet's calls. What about the people? Let's just talk, because see, this is the people. These are Jesus' disciples. There are many of them. Can you think back to the book of Exodus? What happens in the book of Exodus and the people are afraid of God? And there may be multiple instances. I'm thinking of one. Can you think of one? There's one big one. So in the book of Exodus, when the people get to Mount Sinai, God calls a holy convocation, and they're all supposed to gather around the mountain. They're not supposed to go on the mountain. And they are given command, if anybody goes on the mountain, you should shoot them with an arrow. Like, don't go and kill them, but be like, everybody shoot, kill them. Because the mountain's holy, they can't go on the mountain. Only Moses could go up on the mountain. But in the beginning, what happens that they become afraid? Does anybody remember? All right, go back and read it in Exodus. The mountain trembles. The voice of God comes, and it's like it's earth-rending. It's just like an earthquake. And God speaks to them, and they say, no, do not let God speak to us anymore. Rather, you go up, Moses, and you go talk to God. We can't take it anymore. And I used to not really understand that until I had a professor explain it to us one day in class. And what that is that is a picture of your and my need for a priest. We need somebody to be a go-between. Our reaction to the Almighty in His eternal splendor is nothing but sheer terror. What does the Bible say about somebody who sees God? What happens to the man who sees God? he dies. Like we are just overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed. Remember that Indiana Jones movie and Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark? What happens when they look in the ark? The Nazis. Like this spirit comes out, this power comes out and kills them. And Indiana Jones tells him and his girl, like, don't look. Don't look, keep your eyes shut, no matter what happens. And they live, right? So because if you look at God, you're going to die. And they're hearing God and going, no, we can't take it anymore. You go, Moses, and do it for us. And that's our need for a priest. But who is that high priest? Jesus. Which is why when Jesus goes up on the mountain, I'm getting goosebumps. It says Jesus goes up on the mountain, and it says and then his disciples come up and sit down. Because my thought is that maybe they were looking at Jesus up on the mountain and were thinking, is he going to receive some new commandments or something? We better wait. And then Jesus is like, I'm waiting for you. And then they go up on the mountain with him, and they get to hear God's words coming from God himself, but it's because it's mediated now through God, the man God, the God-man, Jesus Christ. Like they get to go on the mountain, and they don't have to be afraid anymore because Emmanuel, God with us, has come. And so their initial thought is just fear. They're like, that's a ghost. Just like the people of Israel, when they heard God speaking, they said, we can't take it. Tell him not to speak anymore. Go up with him. You talk to him. We can't handle it. You can't handle. You remember, you can't handle the truth. You can't handle God in his fullness unless you get to speak with Jesus. Then you can. All right. Any thoughts on that? They're afraid. Okay, verse 27. Immediately Jesus spoke to them. Have courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. In the original language, now this mimics every time an angel appears to God's people, he has to tell them, don't be afraid. And then also there's an added thing here. Jesus, his literal response when it says, it is I, it's literally I am. And so this commentator says that he or she believes that this is like a reference to Jesus' deity, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But just think about that. Because sometimes they just say it that way. It's me. It's me. Yeah. Ego eimi. I am. But I like to think that it happens so often in the Bible, in the New Testament Gospels. Remember in John has 7 I am statements where Jesus is, I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of life which comes down out of heaven. I am the doorway. My sheep, I am the good shepherd, my sheep hear my voice. And so he has these, I am the vine, you're the branches. He has these 7 I am statements in John. And so there is something special. When Jesus says, I am, it is an echo of when God said, I am that I am. Maybe from what we've just said, remember we just said that maybe this echoes kind of the encounter of the people of Israel with God on Mount Sinai. Maybe this is Jesus saying, I'm God. And that may be reading too much into it, but it's important to think about. He says, have courage. I am. Don't be afraid. He just is. Jesus is. We don't have to be afraid. He is who he says he is. So we base our confidence on the circumstances or who Jesus is? We're based on who Jesus is. Does Jesus ever change? He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if he never changes, do we have any need to fear? Now that's easy said. We just have to do it. All right, so we get a chance to look at that. Verse 28. Lord, if it's you, Peter answered him. Let's stop right there. Peter said, if it's you. What do y'all think about that? If it's you. He was truly unsure. So do we really need to be too hard? I don't know. Should we be too hard on Peter here, or what do you think? I mean, Jesus just got through saying, have courage, I am, don't be afraid. But anyway, Peter says, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Now, I think about this. I've thought about this and pondered this. I don't know if you have, but I have. What was the point of Peter walking on the water with Jesus? I mean, I know it's pointing to a higher spiritual ideal, but in that moment, I just put yourself in Peter's mind. What was Peter thinking? And I'm not saying he's wrong. I think I have an answer to it. I mean, I would want to go to Jesus. What do you think he was thinking? Security? Comfort? Yeah, have y'all thought about that? Like, any thoughts? Beth, yeah, what do you think?
When Peter came out of the boat, he was acknowledging his love for Jesus. He wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus was teaching him in order to walk on that water, you've got to hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because without faith and holding on to him, we all drown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he wanted to be with Jesus so badly that he was going to get up and walk to him. Remember another instance in which Peter's in a boat on the water and he sees Jesus? It's at the end of the book of John. And Jesus, remember when, and I'd have to turn to it to say it exactly, but remember what Peter does? He actually does, what does he do in that story? Remember when Peter's already denied Jesus, the crucifixion has happened, Jesus has appeared to them already more than once, and then sometime later, Peter says, I'm going fishing. Remember, Peter says, I'm going fishing. He says to the disciple, I'm going fishing. They're out fishing. Jesus tells them, cast over there. And then they do it, and they say, I think they catch a lot of fish. Right? I preached this sermon for my first trial sermon here. It's at the end of John, and then he says, that was my first ever sermon preached at Elizabeth Chapel Baptist Church. And then, first or second, I'm pretty sure it's the first. And yeah, Jesus says, cast the net on the right side. We're in John 21. We won't stay here long. Cast the net on the right side of the boat, he told them, and you'll find some. So they did, and they were unable to haul it in because of the large number of fish. A repetition of when he called Peter. The disciple, the one Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he tied his outer clothing around him, for he had taken it off, and plunged into the sea. So at this point, it says they're about 100 yards out. So he swims to Jesus. So Peter has this great love for the Master. Don't you see that? Which I think the Chosen brings out quite well. The other disciples, they all have love for Jesus, but Peter's always like, oh, wait, he's like, he and Jesus, he's acting like he has this special relationship. He's all about him. So this kind of gives us insight. He's like so about him that he's got to be where Jesus is, which is admirable. We should want to be with Jesus. And we all want to kick Peter because he fell down, but at least Peter was, out of all them other disciples, at least Peter was brave enough to ask him, Jesus, to let him walk on water. He says, we're back in Matthew 14, verse 28. Lord, if it's you, Peter answered him, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come.
But don't we all doubt in that?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were talking about it a while ago, doubt.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think you do, but Lord, increase my faith.
Yeah.
We ask sometimes. Because is this really you, God? Or is this your voice I really hear? Is it Satan's voice? Are you really saying this to me? Are you really telling me to do this? Or is it just me saying that or me thinking that? I really need to know. For sure. I need to make sure.
And he asked Jesus, and Jesus gives him an answer, doesn't he? It's okay to ask the Lord, tell me what you want me to do. And Jesus says, come. So Peter's not disobeying. He's not messing things up here. And climbing out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. What's that characteristic about the wind that he saw? The strength of the wind. Does any translation, we're in verse 30. Does other translations put it differently? He saw that the wind was boisterous. King James says boisterous. All right, anything else? So it was strong. So we look at the world and its ways, and is it strong? Yes. Listen, let's not ever forget that the power of the enemy is strong. It says that Satan goes about roaring as a lion, seeking whom he may devour. He is strong, and the power of this world is strong, but it's not as strong as Jesus. But it is strong when we look at it, and it's strong in comparison to us. We're weaker than the world. It's strong. We're weak. But in Jesus, we have the strength to overcome. So it is strong. It says he looked at the strength. And, when I think of Peter doing that, I think he had to be listening. He's been, as we've mentioned, he's been fishing for a long time, since he was a boy, I'm sure. And he knows what the winds can do. He may have heard of other sunken ships. They may have had to have funerals for men that never came back, perhaps. Some friends of his. He might have actually known firsthand what a wind that out on that ocean could do. And he might have heard in his mind, the voice even of his own father telling him, be careful, or of those other people around him, what are you thinking? Right sounding voices that tell you to be cautious, be careful. Think about that. It's not always like a bad person that's in your mind telling you need to, oh, be careful. He could have been thinking, well, I just got to be wise in this situation. This wind is strong. I can't go up against this. That just sounds like every other Christian I've ever heard half the time. When we want to try to do something, they're like, well, I don't know that we can do that. But if God's calling us to do it, we can. Okay. And then it says, let's move on. It says, but when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. That's the opposite of faith, is fear. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. He knew who to cry to. So, man, when we are in that situation. Now, Jesus called us. First of all, Jesus told them to go. They went. So they were obedient. He asked Jesus if they could come on the water. Jesus said, come. He did, but then he failed, right? Peter, at this point, should be, what kind of grade does he get at this point? Up until the point that he calls out to Jesus. Well, let's just be honest. He kind of got a good grade in the beginning. Then he gets we'll call it a D, maybe an F, because he fails. He fails. He doesn't have faith. He doesn't continue walking on water. He begins to sink. So does Jesus give up on him? No. He knows to whom he should call. Jesus, it says, immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, so Jesus immediately rescues him. And he says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those in the boat worshipped him and said, truly you are the Son of God. Which in that era, if you call somebody the Son of God, you're equating them with deity. It's not just you are a God, or you are God. You are the Son of God. You are God. You are his progeny. You are genetically the same. You are God. So they proclaim him God. And he is.
In my Bible, in my reference there, this is the best statement I think I've ever heard right here. But it says, to maintain your faith when situations are difficult, keep your eyes on Christ's power.
Okay.
And you're in a
Yeah, so I don't know how we didn't explicitly say this yet, but we should have. at this point. So the way in a situation, yes, what Peter did wrong, what did he do wrong? He took his eyes off Jesus, didn't he? So there were waves there. The waves were always present. But he's looking at Jesus. He says, Lord, if it's you, command me. And he said to walk towards you. And he says, come. And then he takes his eyes off Jesus. Because it says back in verse 30, but when he saw the strength of the wind. And that is a picture, y'all, of him taking his eyes off Jesus and looking at the problems. And it just is all throughout the Bible. It's all throughout the Bible. It says, whenever you're talking about Saul and the people of Israel, and they see Goliath, and they describe how strong, how tall he is, the beam of the shaft of his spear is like a weaver's beam. His shield is so many shekels, or however much it says, heavy. It describes Goliath, and they look at him and they say, there ain't no way. But David is keeping his eyes on the Lord. That's the difference. So look at the Lord, not the circumstances. Don't look at the circumstances. Look at the Lord. Look at his promises. Jesus says, ask and you will receive. Ask anything in my name, and your Father. I will not say that I will do it, for your Father in heaven will already have done it. He knows what you need before you ask him. Ask and you'll receive. Seek and you'll find. Knock, the door will be open to you. Now, look at his promises. Don't look at the ways.
Jesus said, when he said, why did you doubt? I think he might have also been referring to, when Peter said, Lord, if it's you, do something. Because that has always seemed like more of a doubt to me, because Jesus tells him who he is. And then Peter says, well, if it is you, show me. And Thomas kind of does the same thing, where he's told Jesus is alive. And he says, I won't believe it until I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Then that leads into Jesus showing him. And then in John 20:29, it says, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I've always kind of seen it as there was a little bit of doubt there from Peter before he even stepped out onto the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had to have Jesus show him essentially a miracle.
That's what he says. He says, if it's you,
Yeah.
bid me to come to you. You know.
And too, you know, that if they woke up, whenever they were waking up, someone said it's a ghost, and maybe he just heard that part, so then he
Mhm.
asked the question. It'd still be doubt. But this is also teaching us that, Jesus is always trustworthy, even when we doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's almost like salvation, for Scripture.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, he's rescued,
He says, save me.
right, saved. That's what he did. He saved. You can take his and go with us. So,
Mm-hmm.
and, I mean, that just hit me. You know, God, if that's my spirit this day, you know, you can take this and go tell somebody about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
How he saved Peter from drowning. And, you know, like you say, rescued, saved.
Mm-hmm. And he does that for us like all the time. We fail, we mess up, we ask him, Lord, save me. And he does it. Because he's in the saving business. Like it is always about our relationship with God. Like, will we repent and turn to the Lord? And then we'll be blessed. You know, showers of blessing will come. But if we don't, the curse. You know, it's always just a question of what is your orientation toward God? Are you walking toward him? Or are you walking away in faith or doubt? It's always about that. That's what it's all about. You know, return to me and I will return to you. You know, it's always about, are we looking at Jesus? And it's not so much about where we are, it's about what direction we're heading in. Because we could be in a bunch of filth and sin, but if we repent of that, we could, you know, in other words, like picture us a long ways off. Remember the prodigal son? While he was still a long ways off, the father saw him, ran to him, and hugged him. So we could be in filth and sin and, but if we orient ourselves toward Jesus, if we repent of our sin, turn to Him, and call out for Him, He will save us. It's not so much where we're at, it's in which direction we're oriented.
Instantly,
Mm-hmm.
he grabbed Peter's. He didn't wait for him to get, bubbling and then grab hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows, the disciples, they walked, they touched Jesus and was with him and hearing his words. But they were just as much human as we are, and they messed up and we messed up. That's why these things are here, so that we can learn that they're just as human as we are, and we need to learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is right there, and we need that for us too.
And another thing that's been pointed out is that when Jesus, and the scriptures don't say this, but when Jesus and Peter went back to the boat, what were they doing? Swimming? And they were walking on water. They were walking when they went back to the boat. So Peter, you can say, well, Peter, he walked on water, he had doubts, but then what happened? When Jesus picked him up, he was walking on water, and I guess maybe holding Jesus' hand. So when he's holding on to Jesus' hand, he's walking on water. Anything else about this lesson? So he is, as Miss Ivadale pointed out, he is trustworthy. And so he can and he will save if we turn to him. Anything else about this lesson?
Well, our bonus verse
Mm-hmm.
goes along with the second day, is taken from Isaiah 41:10. And it says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand."
Yeah. Amen. That's good. That's good. That's good. He reaches out, pulls them up. All right. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for allowing us to come